Luis Alvarez, President and CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, is here to discuss news from ConnectWise, Axcient, Pulseway, Huntress Labs, and more, plus a special guest interview with NetApp's Vice President of Modern Workplace, JD Helms. It's ChannelPro Weekly, episode 151, 8 Essential Vitamins. Hello, everyone, and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 151. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you, the MSPs, the VARs, the IT integrators, the IT consultants, the IT PLs. I'm just going to run off a bunch of letters because there's a lot of IT kind of roles. And if you work with computers and you work with other businesses, you are in the right place. If you shear sheep at the local zoo, well, you could get a new job after this because you'll know a lot more about IT, and I think that probably might pay a little bit more money than shearing sheep. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here so much. I'm also glad to have back with us, who is here most show, but I like him. I like to keep him around. What can I say? Executive editor of ChannelPro, the man who keeps the trains moving on time over here, Rich Freeman.
Well, welcome to you, Matt, and welcome to summertime, right? Aren't we officially in summertime now?
We are officially in summer, although around here it's still feels kind of like a nice late spring, although it got hot for a little while. But yep, a few days ago we passed the summer's threshold, and we are here and arrived. Now, what is summer like in Seattle?
Summer is brief but wonderful in Seattle. So we don't really get spring. We just go from winter to this slightly less cold, dreary winter, and then right around this time of year, and sure enough, this week the weather has been very nice. Right around July 4th every year, summer just suddenly arrives, and it's like upper 70s, lower 80s, very little humidity for about 2 months, and then we go right back into the weather everybody thinks about when they hear Seattle.
It sounds nice. We see here in the Midwest, where I'm at, which is very northern Illinois, it's like Arctic tundra, and then we might have like a week of spring, and then the mosquitoes come out, and it's hot and humid, really humid and windy, and like that's all we get until the tundra again after like 4 days of nice fall weather. So that's where I live. But you know who I want to learn about where he lives and his weather patterns that he has to put up with every day. And I'm super excited to get him on because he's presented at a bunch of our live events, and he's done some of our virtual events. In fact, he's got one coming up with us, the IoT Playbook online forum is coming up. I know he's going to be a part of that. I've just been so excited to get him on. Luis Alvarez, the president and CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, is here. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Nice intro, Matt. I really appreciate that. And Rich, I'll tell you that my wife's family lives up in the Olympic Peninsula, and every summer, except this summer, unfortunately, we go up crabbing off of Fort Flagler up there. It's a campground. We set up tents and we just catch crab for 4 or 5 days straight in July, and it is it's been gorgeous weather, but we've been doing it for about 20 years, and 20 years ago it was wet and dreary, and thanks to climate change, it's not so wet and dreary anymore. It's a lot nicer.
And so do you catch the crab? You catch the crab, but then do you eat the crab?
We eat the crab. We crack it right there on the beach. And so you hear them whine as you cut them in half because they kind of go ee as they die. But we cook the crab. We make all sorts of crab stuff, so much so that by the end of that 4 days, I need a big ass prime rib to get through the rest of my trip in Seattle.
All right. Well, very cool. Now, so we were talking about weather and summer, and you are from Central California, if I remember correctly. What is the weather like in summer there for you?
It's really nice. I mean, usually we have a few days of winter. The evenings are crisp and cool. We occasionally even get a little snow flurry in the winter, but then for the rest of the year, it's typically somewhere between 68 and 75 year-round and during the day, and gets into the low 50s at night. Real pleasant, very nice weather. It's the reason I live here.
Sounds awful. I would much rather have 95 with 100% humidity.
That was Miami. That's where I lived before I left. So
now that is hot and wet, no doubt for sure.
Yeah.
So, Luis, I really am glad to have you here. Please, by all means, why don't you start off by telling everybody a little about you and a little bit about your company?
Sure. So Alvarez Technology Group, this year we celebrate our 20th year in business. Really proud of that. weathered many a storm. We think the COVID thing is bad, but yeah, hey, we were there for the recession of the early 2000s, the 2007, 2008 financial crisis. And I like to believe that in every case we emerged stronger and better. And we've also been through a number of technology changes. I mean, everything from, building our own PCs back in the day to cloud computing and digital transformation. So it's exciting. And every time I think I'm starting to get bored and tired, something new and exciting happens. IoT, all sorts of interesting things going on in that space, which excites me. We're about 25 people based in Salinas, California, which is in Steinbeck country. If you know anything about John Steinbeck, this is where he wrote all his books back in the day. By the way, nobody here in Salinas likes John Steinbeck or his books. That he was telling, tales out of school, and nobody likes that because most of his books are based on real people that exist even today. So
That's awesome.
they hold a grudge. And I got out here in this area after spending 11 years on active duty in the Air Force, settling in Monterey, where they have the Defense Language Institute. I was a linguist, an intel analyst, and stayed in the reserves for another 11 years. Did a stint in Desert Storm 1 when that happened. But throughout right after I got out of the Air Force, I wanted to get into technology because the Air Force actually exposed me to computers for the first time ever. I mean, it wasn't a career field that I chose, but I just stumbled upon it because in the early 80s, the Air Force decided to buy these things called IBM PCs. And the guys who ran the MIS, remember that saying, the management information, the people, they wanted nothing to do with these PCs. They were like, man, these are nothing but glorified typewriters. These are not computers. And so the Air Force gave them out to the units and said, well, somebody in your unit figure out how to use this. And I volunteered to do that. And I became, addicted to technology at that level and the computers, and continued along that route. Got out of the Air Force, was a early employee in a small startup IT company or computer company back then. We built our own PCs. We sold that company in '99 at the height of the dot-com boom, which was great. And then 2000 happened, which was not so great. And I ended up leaving that company and starting my own company. And it's been a great ride. And I love the fact that we've been, we work with a lot of people in a lot of different industries, and we're very responsive to what they need and what their success looks like. And that's part of our culture, is to make our clients safe, secure, and successful.
Hey, I'm going to point out, some of us still do build our own PCs. It's not like it's an ancient practice.
I did it when you had little memory chips, little cockroaches that you had to put in line on those motherboards. So I bent many a little leg on those little cockroach chips.
The cockroach chips and jumpers. Remember all the jumper switches you'd have to set on a motherboard? Oh my gosh, there was like 100 of them.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Good memories. Good memories.
Go ahead, Rich. Sound like you wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to point out, I mean, we have known Luis at ChannelPro for about as long as there's been a ChannelPro. I mean, you've been a great source to us on a whole bunch of different trends in the industry it's got to be back to like 2007 or something like that. So yeah, one of our favorites, one of our go-tos.
Oh, we've known him this long, and this is we had to get 151 episodes in before we got him on. What is going on?
I was busy.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I just realized, before extending the invitation to him, how could we have gone this far? Well, I'm glad to have you on.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you extended the invitation, and there's a lot going on as we emerge from the COVID induced paranoia that we had to deal with there for 3 months here in California. We're entering phase 3, as we call it, and hoping not to fall back into phase 2 as the state continues to kind of move forward with that progress. But we're starting to see our clients want to do things again. There was, I think, a lot of MSPs will tell you that right at the beginning of April, end of March, when things started to really tighten up, there was a sense of okay, let's just kind of hunker down and get through this. This will end soon. And it wasn't until, kind of toward the end of April that we started to feel that, well, this is not going to end. This is not something that there's a date certain we're going to get a knock on the door and the governor's going to say, yeah, you're done. You can go play again. And so we would have to adapt to what the new abnormal looks like. And we've been doing that, working with our clients on a number of solutions to get them back to work, a number of conversations that we're having about accelerating this concept of digital transformation, taking them to the cloud faster. A lot of them that were resisting and were kind of wondering if that was really ever going to be part of their future now are the ones that are talking to us the hardest about, hey, how soon can we get there? There's budget constraints and things like that, but at least we're starting to move into what I think is the real future of technology, which is a very hybrid one with edge computing and cloud computing married together, and letting people work, do anything, anytime, from anywhere, basically.
Let's make sure that you get a nice wedding gift as they get married together. So, well, we're super glad to have you here. We've got a lot of news stories to go through, and Luis, you'll be here with us through the whole show, and we're looking forward to getting your opinion and thoughts on some of these. We also have a great interview coming up with JD Helms from NetApp. So that's going to be worth sticking around for. Really good interview there. And also, of course, as we go and we talk about these various stories, of course, we're going to learn a little bit more about you, Luis, your company, and how you're dealing with coronavirus and how it's affected you and your business and your customers. So it's going to be awesome. For those who are listening on the podcast right now on your mobile phone or tablet, we have links to all of these stories that we're going to talk about in the show notes page at channelpronetwork.com. So find the episode page for episode 151, and we're going to scratch the surface and kind of give our thoughts, but you'll want to have those links so you can go and follow along and get all the detail on every story. If you're watching on YouTube, hello, you can see me wave. We open up that description area, and then you will also see the same links to all of the stories that we're going to talk about here on the show, so you can follow along with us. It's going to be an awesome and fun, wild ride. I can't wait. Rich, ConnectWise is in the news this week. We've got two stories, but you told me to treat them as one, and I can see why. They're kind of the same. They're related, of course. Tell us what ConnectWise has going on.
So ConnectWise this week hosted their IT Nation Explore event, which was, originally going to be in Florida in person. It's an online event, but it was spread out across 4 days this week. And ConnectWise, as usual at that event, made some news. Almost all of it, sign of the times, almost all of it is security related. And that's why these two stories that we're kind of hinting at here are so closely related. So first of all, on the product side, you think back to very end of October, beginning of November, when we discovered that ConnectWise had acquired Continuum. So two big names in the managed services, software and services market come together, very complementary in terms of the strengths on each side of that relationship. And on the Continuum side of the relationship in particular, they had a whole suite of security tools that they called Fortify at that time. And so ConnectWise has added a entirely new solution to the Fortify family, which, by the way, it used to be Continuum Fortify. One of the news items this week is that product and all the other Continuum products have been rebranded ConnectWise. So it's now ConnectWise Fortify, and ConnectWise Fortify now includes a SaaS security product called Fortify for SaaS Security. It is set to come out in July. It is, at this point in time, 100% focused on Microsoft 365 and Office 365. Over time, that will change. The ConnectWise folks aren't being specific about which other SaaS solutions they add to the product. They kind of hinted, Google G Suite might make sense, Salesforce might make sense. They haven't really made any decisions yet in that area. But obviously, as SMBs, as the entire industry shifts into the cloud security is becoming a bigger need and a bigger market. And now the Fortify family that already had network security and endpoint security is going to have SaaS security as well. In addition, there is going to be coming up in Q3 of this year, a new edition of the Fortify for Assessment product. So Fortify for Assessment is more of a pre-sales tool. It has dark web on it. It does risk assessment, but it hasn't really had true vulnerability scanning in that product yet. And so there were a lot of ConnectWise partners who were telling ConnectWise, we love the tool, but we're combining it with something else that does vulnerability scanning so that we can provide a complete overview of the environment to our customers. And there's a lot of, manual copying and pasting involved. And so coming up in Q3, ConnectWise will add a vulnerability scanning tool to that system. It will be available in a new version of Fortify for Assessment called, or an advanced version of it. They don't have an official name for it yet, but for a little extra money, you'll be able to do the vulnerability scanning on top of what you've done with that product already.
So what you're saying is that Fortify is going to be fortified with vulnerability scanning capabilities, right?
That's right.
Now, did they say anything about also being fortified with more vitamins, minerals, and iron?
8 of them, yes. So it will be all you need for a healthy breakfast, Matt. And delicious too.
Take them on a full stomach, though. Never empty stomach. Bad things happen.
That's right.
Please continue before I fall out of my chair.
Okay. So that's on the product side, and it's important to have the products that you need to properly secure your end user, but you also kind of need to know how to use those products, what it means to provide good, high-quality security services to your customers. So the other big set of announcements that came out of ConnectWise this week has to do more around that partner education kind of function. So and we'll start with something really kind of interesting. ConnectWise has created their own cybersecurity framework. And I say their own, this is something that they're just distributing to the industry. It has nothing, you don't have to be a ConnectWise partner to use it. You're not buying anything, but they have created a brand new cybersecurity framework specifically for MSPs. So a lot of folks in the audience are probably familiar with other frameworks, like most famously the NIST framework. A lot of people have adopted. But from a ConnectWise standpoint, they found something like 50 different frameworks in existence right there, but they couldn't find anything that was specific both to MSP and to SMB. And so what they did was pull out the best pieces, they thought, of these 50 different frameworks, combine it with some of their own best practices and intellectual property, and create an entirely new cybersecurity framework just for MSPs. They have, this week as well, introduced a playbook that is going to help newcomers to the framework understand how it works and take advantage of it. One of the distinctive things about it is that it has what they call a maturity model built into it. So obviously what you need from a framework is going to be different if you are brand new to cybersecurity than if you already have a cybersecurity practice and you're just maybe looking to enhance it some. So they're going to have different levels of expertise built into the framework, and different frameworks for each one. So the beginner playbook is out now. Also significant, ConnectWise has introduced an entirely new partner community that they're calling IT Nation Secure. So IT Nation is the master brand for everything sort of community oriented that they do. They've got IT Nation Evolve, which is their peer groups. They've got the IT Nation events. They've got IT Nation Share, which is like the peer-to-peer best practice sharing, user groups around the country. And they've added an entirely new major component to the IT Nation family called IT Nation Secure that is 100% focused on education for MSPs who want to learn more about security and develop a security practice, and also want to share information about security with their peers. And that community will have its own, I'm guessing, rather large event, assuming we are doing in-person events again in November. At some point that month, ConnectWise is planning to do an event called IT Nation Secure Live. So new security products from ConnectWise, and also new resources that are designed to help partners just get deeper into security more effectively.
So my first question goes to Luis, and we could talk, there's a lot here to talk about and discuss, but I'm dying to know the first question, Luis. Luis, how many frameworks is enough?
One is enough. You just have to pick it and decide which one you're going to use. So for us, we embrace the NIST cybersecurity framework as our foundational tool for our managed security practice. We liked it because it was widely adopted. It was something that was easy to digest. And when you read through it, we were able to find solutions to each one of the elements of the framework. What I like that, and I actually attended Explore and heard the news when they were making the announcements. What I like about what ConnectWise is doing, and in spirit of full disclosure, we are a ConnectWise partner. Don't eat all the dog food, but most of it. And they are recognizing that MSPs have a much higher profile today than ever. And this whole concept of being a managed service provider, or even extending that to become a managed security service provider, means that you're putting a target on your back by telling people who are out there wanting to do bad things that I have access to all of my clients' systems. Please hack into me, and then you have the keys to the kingdom. And that's happened time and time again. There's so many stories. We don't have to go into them all, but MSPs that get compromised, that then compromise their clients, has become a cliche in our industry. And especially at the lower end of the MSP space, where we have people that call themselves MSPs that are just, a chuck in a truck, a guy or a gal who works out of their house and has a few clients, all the way to multinational billion-dollar companies that do managed services for the big Fortune 100 companies. But yet we all call ourselves MSPs, and there's no standard that says to be an MSP, here's what you have to do. But that's changing, and I applaud ConnectWise for getting in front of that. Right now, I've mentioned the NIST cybersecurity framework. NIST has a draft out there for a cybersecurity framework specifically for MSPs. And if you look at it, it aligns very well with what ConnectWise is doing. So they're taking these recommendations from the draft and they're saying, okay, how do we actionize that? How do we make it so that somebody can say that, because sometimes these frameworks are talk at a very esoteric, high level, and you're trying to figure out what does that mean for me? How many switches do I have to buy? What do I have to do a VLAN? Tell me, please. So they've done that. They've taken that higher level concept and brought it down to kind of a checklist that you can use to institute protections into your environment. And for those people out there who think that the idea of any sort of federal or state agency creating some sort of standards for MSPs, that's never going to happen. It's happened. Louisiana did it this month. So if you use the term MSP, managed service provider, in Louisiana, and you have any public agencies that you work with, whether that's a city government, whether it's a water department, or public works, whatever, you have to register with the state as a managed services provider, and you have to provide documentation that shows what you're doing to protect yourself. And that's only going to cascade. I think you're going to see every state, just like you had some states early on create breach notification laws that required IT service providers to report those breaches. Now pretty much every state has a breach notification requirement. You're going to see the same thing for managed services providers. There's going to be the standard that's going to dictate that if you use that term or you do that work, right? Even if you don't call yourself a managed security or managed services provider, but you do that kind of work, you're going to have to go through some sort of certification process. That's inevitable. It's just a matter of when it's going to get here. And so I think ConnectWise, for the community as a whole, but specifically for its partners, is doing us a great service in creating a framework that we can digest and implement sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and so interesting point about Louisiana in particular. Regular listeners know we had Dave Sobel on the show as a guest host just a few weeks back, and he was very early onto that story. He does a podcast every weekday called The Business of Tech, and he actually had the Attorney General of Louisiana on the show to talk about that. When it was still all kind of at an early stage, and discussed it with us. So yeah, interesting to see that progressing there. And I think you're totally right that we're going to see that, if not in every state, then almost every state at some point going forward. And then quickly before we move on, I'll just point out, because you were talking about how, the MSPs themselves now are in the crosshairs. and because you have the keys to the kingdom in the database there. There was some talk at the IT Nation Explore event this week about, acknowledgement of that at ConnectWise, because ConnectWise, like all the big players, has had, partners get hacked. And so all these companies are very, very concerned about that right now and taking steps to try to mitigate that threat. And at ConnectWise, what that has included, among other things, they now have an information security function reporting straight into the CTO. I mean, they had that within the different product groups before, but they've really kind of elevated that to a global function at a very high level from a product vision standpoint. And then in addition to having the product security people in the product groups, making sure that all the code was secure, they've created these kind of cross product groups where security experts from outside this particular product organization will look at the new version of the software and vet it from an outsider's or a third party's kind of perspective. They're not quite as in the weeds or partial to bias or whatever, that you get a kind of neutral outsider's perspective. So just a couple of examples of things that they're doing, like all these other vendors are doing right now to really make sure they're building security into their software.
Yeah, and managed services providers, it's not just about the products that you use, it's about the entire the entire ecosystem that we work in. We've gotten by way of example, we do a lot of work with regulated industries, banking and financial services, but also, just general horizontal professional services. In the last 2 months, we've gotten requests from the clients that we serve to fill out paperwork for their cyber insurance policy, so that the cyber insurance company knows that we're doing all the right work for them. So it's not just making sure that that particular client is doing all the right things. They want to know that, because there's a line item right there on the checklist. Do you use an MSP? If so, give them this checklist and have them fill it out and make sure that it's filled out accurately, or you might be denied a claim in the future. And the idea there is insurance companies now know what MSPs are. They didn't know before. Now they know what MSPs are, and they know how critical they are to protecting the clients who they are serving, who they're providing coverage for, and they want to make sure that we're doing the right things internally for ourselves as well as for them. So it's an interesting dynamic, and we're going to see more and more of that, I'm sure.
And it probably would have been a lot easier before they knew you existed. So
yes,
it's too bad we can't put that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, if we kept our mouth shut, we'd be fine. But no, we like to advertise.
So, speaking of taking genies out of the bottle, Axcient has a new unified BDR solution that they will never stuff back in the bottle unless it's a colossal failure, and then they might. I don't know. Rich, want to tell us about their new unified BDR?
Yeah, and this is kind of a significant milestone in a long story. So the company that is Axcient today, it really, to go all the way back to the beginning of the story, you have to go back to 2013 when a company called eFolder bought another company, a file sync and share company called Anchor. And over time since then, eFolder buys Anchor, then they buy Replibit, which is a BDR company. eFolder and Axcient in 2017 merged. 2018, they decided to just do business under one name. Everything is Axcient now. But at that point in time, when you get to that 2017, 2018 point in this story, you've got a company with a whole bunch of different products. So 3 different BDR solutions, for example, a cloud backup product, a file sync and share product. Different interfaces, different management planes, different billing engines. And the vision from the beginning, especially once eFolder and Axcient came together, was to pull all of that together into one big unified business availability platform. They really took a very significant step towards that vision back in late October, early November at IT Nation Connect, actually, when they officially announced the launch of their X360 platform, which was going to be the next generation platform that ultimately pulls all of those different solutions together into one big solution with a number of different pieces within it, but one interface, ultimately one sign-in, one management interface, one billing engine. Everything was going to come together in X360. The very first thing that they announced last year was something that is today called X360 Cloud, which is their cloud backup solution. Since then, they added another component to that called X360 Sync, which is the file sync and share piece of the platform. And what they did this week was essentially complete X360, although they will be adding more functionality down the road. But in terms of unifying all the big assets that they had coming out of the eFolder Axcient merger, they created something called X360 Recover this week, and that takes their Replibit product, their BRC product, and their Fusion product, the three separate BDR systems that they had, rolls it all together into one big system, and then rolls that into the X360 platform that also does cloud and file sync and share. They make a point of emphasizing at Axcient, if you are a BRC user or a Replibit user, et cetera, you are not losing anything by virtue of the fact that these products no longer exist independently. They're all one big system. So one morning you logged into your software, everything you had before was still there, but now you had access to all of these other features. And the unified X360 Recover product is designed at least to combine the strong points of each of those individual products. So, the folks at Axcient will tell you that Replibit, for example, very easy to use, very quick, very responsive, but the cloud recovery experience was not really all that great. BRC, sort of the opposite, great cloud recovery experience, but a little bit slow and harder to use in some respects. From their perspective, they've engineered things so that X360 Recover has the cloud recovery experience that you knew from BRC, but the usability that you were getting from Replibit. It's they're trying to make it a best of all worlds kind of solution. But like I said, it's a big step forward in this 3-year process that Axcient has been in the midst of. They're just trying to pull all these different products together into truly a unified platform.
It's kind of like it sounds like the old story when a whole bunch of people in college come together as roommates, and everybody's got like a toaster, so you end up with 4 toasters. And then, but you don't want to get rid of all the toasters though, because sometimes you need the backup toaster, because that one toaster is gonna fail, right? But you don't need 3 stereos. So this is all about just kind of piecing together but you throw away the stereo, the guy that had the worst stereo, and you keep the best stereo. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
I couldn't have said it better. In fact, yeah, no, that's.
And the person with the big, like you got a 42-inch, a 55-inch, and a 65. You keep the 65-inch TV, but I gotta stress, Rich, you keep the backup toaster, because you always need a backup toaster. I also got to say this. I think I'm ready to add 360 to my list of branding no-nos going forward. Luis, I don't know how many episodes you've listened to, but I have got a serious bone to pick with lazy marketing departments and branding, the people who come up with branding, because they're all lazy. They use like one something, right? Like Microsoft came out with like OneDrive, or it was OneNote. Like they had that one product, and then they started using it a lot. And everyone was like, "Yeah, we're gonna call everything one. This is gonna be the one BDR. It's gonna be the one virus antivirus." It's it's like, it's lazy, and it was the same thing with like back when Apple had the iPod. Everything was everything. 360 is now on the list. I'm done with 360s, Rich. We can't, and like this is so lazy, right? It's like, how can we play off Xbox 360, right? I mean, Microsoft has got to have a problem with this, don't you think? It's too close. It's too close. I can't handle the brand. Luis, aside from the fact that this is lazy branding, it looks like a nice solution and a long time coming to piece together a cohesive solution from Axcient. What do you think?
Well, again, in the spirit of full disclosure, we are an Axcient partner, and actually, I guess we pick really good products. I take it as a compliment, because we started with eFolder back when John Williams was still around, and Big John would go to these events and tout his eFolder. And
for our listeners, he is not referring to the composer that made the Star Wars music.
Not that
he is
guy,
referring to the person at eFolder, so we are all clear.
John Williams, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but John created eFolder and the concept behind this cloud, direct to cloud backup solution that later he added a BDR to early on when BDRs, nobody knew what that was all about. Then they acquired Replibit. And then we started with a company called Anchor because we really liked them. And then eFolder acquired Anchor. Then we became an Axcient partner, and then they all got together again. And I'm like, okay, now this is kind of fun because we've been on this journey with all of them this entire time. And I am on the Axcient Advisory Council, so a lot of these changes we saw on the roadmap, and we were, the thing that I'll give Axcient credit for and Dave Bennett is that they listened to their partners, and we were telling them, look, I come from the BRC side of Axcient, didn't know Replibit from anything, but now that I've gotten to know it, I love the product and how quick and responsive it is, how quickly you can set up a VM if you have a need for on-prem. But it's a little kludgy. The interface is a little kludgy. The cloud piece is way kludgy. And we said, but you have this awesome, beautiful RMC that's part of the Axcient BRC. Can we just use that? Can we figure out a way to make that all work? And that's what they're doing. And so I give them credit for that. I give them credit for keeping the partners informed every step of the way. I think it's a good direction for us to go, because one of the challenges that we all have is that if you use any sort of cybersecurity framework, one of the key elements is that recovery element, right? How do you, every cybersecurity framework that is out there, whether it's NIST or something else, all assume that a bad thing is going to happen. It doesn't assume that you can, brick out or, create a brick wall and keep the bad guys out. So assuming something bad happens, how do you recover from that? And we've had the opportunity, unfortunately, with Axcient to have to spin up virtual systems for our clients because of either hardware disasters or natural disasters. We had a client whose building got flooded and their servers got, water and servers that are plugged in don't play nice together. So we had to spin up their entire environment for 2 weeks running off the Axcient, and it was awesome. I mean, it worked like it's supposed to, and that to me is a key component. Bringing them all together and getting the best of each one of those systems and making it seamless is something that I think they had to do. To their credit, they're moving forward with it. So I'm looking forward to see what that looks like by the end of the year, when I think they're targeting it to be completed.
Yeah, I mean, and 2 quick points about that. And we, neither one of us should talk about this a whole lot because this has not, it's something they're hinting at, but haven't really spoken much about. But they are going to be adding a direct-to-cloud component to X360 later on in the year. They're very excited about it. They wouldn't tell me why, because it's all under wraps, but they feel like they've got something that nobody else has coming along here in a few months. I'm guessing you've seen some of that. Yep. Under lock and key, not sharing, but that's coming along soon. We'll see what that's about. The other thing I will just quickly point out, because the lucky streak we've got going on this show, Matt, is incredible. So we had Scott Beck on the show a few weeks ago, and I just invited Scott on because he's an interesting guy, and I, let's have him on the show. Turned out to be a week when Kaseya was making news, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm a Kaseya partner, and I can tell you exactly what I think about this." ConnectWise and Axcient are in the news. Boom, we've got Luis here. This was not planned, folks. It just could not have worked out any more perfectly.
Clearly, I got really nervous. I thought Luis for a second was going to say, I'm on the advisory board. And that was my idea for a brand, by the way. And I was getting ready to be like, oh, it's a great idea. I love it. It's the best ever.
No, that I leave to their... we did have input into a number of different names that they were looking at, and 360 was not my favorite one, but the other ones weren't like awesome either. There was just a bunch of okay. But X360, I think, accomplishes what they're trying to do, which is, hey, we're there for you at every point in the compass. So we want to create a product set that achieves everything. And to your point about the direct to cloud, that is something that some people need, especially if you have a remote workforce where you now have all of these systems spread throughout, who knows where, and data is, and corporate data is being captured on those systems. You need to be able to back those up and make sure that you don't lose it.
Yeah. It's hard coming up with good marketing names. I know. I was kind of thinking for a second, like, we were talking about everything you need for a healthy breakfast. They could have gone up with a breakfast theme on this, I think, Axcient complete breakfast. We'll keep frosted Axcient. We'll have to keep thinking about that, folks. If you have a good idea for a brand that doesn't involve 360, that encompasses totality, completeness, what would your brand be? And if you can make it food related, I'll talk about it here on the podcast next week.
It's like when we named Alvarez Technology Group, we really had to, think long and hard about that one.
That's a chin scratcher. I know. That's a tough one. But it's inevitable though. At some point, it's going to get truncated to ATG, for whatever reason, because you're going to get into a fight with somebody and the HR is going to kick you out or something. Who knows? Anything could happen. You wouldn't do that though, Luis. I know you wouldn't. So. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Huntress Labs. Now, Rich, we haven't talked about Huntress Labs, at least in a little while, at least since we had, his name's escaping me, but we had
Kyle Hanselman. Yep.
Kyle, yeah, and he was on episode 134. We had him on to talk to. But we've got them in the news. They've expanded their security solution into what, Rich?
Well, they have basically turned what was a security product into part of a security platform. So here's another little sign of the times, a little indicator of the fact that it is a good time to be in security. Huntress Labs has been around for 5 years at this point. They've got about 1,300 partners. They've done quite well. Up until this point, they've really been known for a particular solution, a threat hunting solution. They call it their persistent foothold system. So Kyle Hanselman, the CEO of the company we're talking about, was a very, very sophisticated, successful cybersecurity guy in the military. His job, he was on offensive cyber ops. His job, was to get really tiny agents, viruses or what have you, onto enemy systems and have them sit there undetected. So there aren't a whole lot of people on the planet who are better at spotting other people trying to do this. And their first product was, designed to do that, to go into an end user environment and find a persistent foothold that some attacker has planted there, and that they're using to, monitor the environment, make lateral movement, what have you. What they did now, though, they've added 2 more services. One is they call it their ransomware canaries service, as in canary in a coal mine, something that's going to spot evidence of ransomware in progress or an impending ransomware attack and notify you of that so that you can take action. The other new product that they've added is an external monitoring system that will essentially continuously do vulnerability scanning in an end user environment. And if it sees, some configuration setting that's set poorly, something wrong in a firewall, something that should, some defense that should be in place and isn't, it'll send you a notification you're not meeting best practices, et cetera. All of which is interesting, but what's especially interesting is that if you were a subscriber to the Persistent Foothold product before, you just woke up one morning and you got these other 2 solutions. It's part of the same subscription that you had before, and you're not paying any more for any of it. Basically, from Huntress's point of view, their margins are looking good. The incremental cost they feel of delivering these new services is not that great. And they're just going to keep kind of adding services to the product, to the platform now, without raising prices. Somewhere down the road, if the economics behind this change, maybe they'll have to change that model. But they really don't see that coming. For right now, they just sort of feel like they're, from the beginning, their vision was, we need to keep an eye on what attackers are doing and adapt to the latest attack techniques and make sure that we can help MSPs keep their customers safe from those new techniques. And they're just going to kind of keep doing that. That's inevitably going to mean adding more products to the platform, but they'll just kind of keep doing that over time as attacks evolve and the defenses in response to those attacks evolve, and they're not going to be charging people anymore from that. You buy into the platform and you get the whole deal.
Security seems like a kind of a comprehensive thing that you can't leave any part of it out because then you're insecure. So I think that makes sense. It's interesting they're not raising any prices though. But it's not surprising that they're trying to evolve this to a platform, because a product is a product. A platform is something that you can step off from and grow from, right? So clearly they're going to try to grow into other areas. It seems like a natural evolution of companies. Now, Luis, you're going to tell me you're on the security advisory board for Huntress Labs, and you have Kyle's ear. And let me tell you about Luis. Have you ever met Kyle? You ever talked to him?
Yeah, Kyle and I are good friends.
That dude is scary smart. I got to tell you, he is like one of the smartest people I've ever talked to in my life.
Yeah. He's also an Air Force vet. So he and I, we are Huntress partner, not on their advisory council. I only have so many hours in my life available. So
you're his friend. You can tell him what you think.
But we became a Huntress partner like 3 years ago. We really liked their product. It was for our approach to security. It filled a gap that we didn't have, kind of an MDR type thing. And they have saved our bacon more times than I care to mention, because their product truly works. And when you get a call at 10 o'clock at night from their team saying, hey, one of your clients has something that looks suspiciously like ransomware and it's starting to morph, that's crazy service that you don't expect. You kind of expect to show up the next day and see a ticket in the ConnectWise managed queue saying ransomware detected at 3 a.m. It's now 10. What are you gonna do? So they have a great product. It works really well. What distinguishes them, I think, on the threat detection and remediation is that they provide the remediation steps. They don't just tell you, hey, there's something going on here. They tell you, here's what's going on, here's how you get rid of it. And now they've automated that process, which was one of the things that really added value. And so, June 22nd, we wake up and all of a sudden we got this other stuff on our dashboard that we can use for no additional cost. And that was pretty cool. And what I like is that, as MSPs, as IT service providers, the biggest challenge we have is justifying our cost to our clients, especially if a lot of the work that we do is in the background, right? Like we sit there waiting for something bad to happen, then we jump to action and we fix it. But if nothing bad happens over time, they start to wonder, what exactly am I paying you for? So we tend to do what a lot of MSPs do, is try to find ways to add value without adding cost. What can we be doing to justify the fees that we charge you already to make you feel like it's worth it? And I think they've taken a page, out of that particular playbook and said, let's add these services. They have true value, but why charge more for them? Let's just put them out there. If our costs aren't significantly higher and we can, this will help us grow the pie, makes a lot of sense. And it's two components that I think are just the beginning of where they're going to go. I suspect, like you pointed out, Matt, a product is easy to kind of kick to the side, because if it just does one thing, then you can find something else that maybe does that one thing and something else. And all of us have been guilty in this industry of replacing a product with another product that maybe did two things out instead of just one. And this, by creating a platform, just like ID Agent has done, right? Like a lot of these other single point solutions have done, is add more pieces to what they can offer to continue to justify what they provide their, the value that they provide the community as a whole. So I'm excited about what Huntress has done. I have not had a chance to play with it yet, other than just look at some of the configuration things and some of the notes in there, but I'm going to spend some time this weekend poking around, and especially setting up those canaries. I'm kind of curious to see how that works.
Yeah, and it's a lot more honest with what they're doing than to infect your own customers with ransomware in order to justify your existence.
Yes.
So
No,
definitely
we do
good.
that, but that's that's a last resort thing.
Not saying you've done that. I'm just saying some people probably would consider that if their customers were starting to wonder why they were around. Very cool. Rich, anything else you want to say about Huntress before we move on to our Pulseway story? Because I cannot wait to talk about this.
So just very quickly, I'll point out, so like we said, they're going to be adding more components to the platform without raising the price. There's one coming along relatively soon that I will be very interested to learn more about. It is a managed version of Windows Defender. So Windows Defender is the free endpoint security product from Microsoft, which I keep hearing from security experts like Kyle, is outperforming some of the paid for products out there. And they're looking to create a managed version of that, where they're kind of providing that management for you. I will be very interested to learn more about that, and just get some thoughts from folks out in the channel about where that might fit into the endpoint protection market.
Very interesting. Might also be worthwhile to try to get Kyle back on to talk about that, because that sounds like a very, very interesting conversation. All right, well, we are going to move on to our last news story. So, Rich, Pulseway has launched something that we talked about. This is really interesting. Rich, tell us about this.
Yeah, so I assume the check is in the mail on this product here. So, Pulseway, as I imagine a lot of folks in the audience here know, they are a managed service software provider. They have a suite with RMM and PSA, BDR, antivirus. What they did this week is introduce a standalone patch management product. So they've actually been doing a lot in the last year or so to really make a specialty of patch management. They have this whole new patch management system that they introduced. It has the ability to patch custom applications that maybe you've created, or niche applications that other patch management engines don't support. A number of other interesting features that they have added over the course of the last 12 months or so. And now what they've essentially done is take that functionality, some bits and pieces of RMM functionality that, necessary functionality that goes along with it, and put that on the market as a standalone patch management only tool. And I say the check is in the mail because I was interviewing the CEO about this product a few days ago. And I asked, what was the thinking? Where did you come up with the idea for a standalone patch management tool? And he said, well, actually, it was the ChannelPro Weekly podcast. And he was being facetious, of course, but he said, the last time you spoke about it, and I have no memory of this at all, Matt, so we have to go back and find this. But apparently we were talking about Pulseway on the show, and somehow or another along the way, we just started musing, maybe it was our guest host, what those guys should do is just create a standalone patch management tool. Wouldn't that be great? And it turns out that was something that they already had in the works, and here it is now. And they see it as a fit really for two markets, and one is especially now when you work from home and you've got all these home PCs that people are on and remote systems. If you're not going to go the whole managed services route, you're not going to make an investment immediately in a full-blown RMM system. At least get the patching right. So that there's a market out there that really just needs to do patching. And then the other market they're going to go after is MSPs who have an RMM platform but maybe don't like the patching functionality that they have now. They're hoping that this can be something that people might staple together with that other platform. So the pricing, as you expected, they sell patch management as an add-on to their RMM. So you pay one fee for the RMM and a little bit extra if you want to get the patch management. You're going to pay more than that if you're buying patch management alone. And I'm looking for the numbers. It's still not terribly expensive. 90 cents per endpoint per month is the starting point on that, and it goes down with volume purchases. So
I'm sure Luis can attest. If it's good patch management, because there's just a lot of companies that just don't have patch management right. If it's good, that is worth its weight in gold.
Yep. Agreed.
And we're waiting for the check.
Yeah, so that would no doubt we talked about this on episode 131, and that must have been with Mr. Dave Seibert, who was actually on not all that long ago, because that was when they rolled out their patch management for custom applications, and that's when I remember we were having a conversation about it. So That's pretty cool that we were somewhat of at least a validation of their idea.
Right.
It sounds like it was kind of already in the works, but it's always good to also talk to a listener and have someone who mentions us. So that's great. Very, very cool stuff. Luis, let's talk a little bit about patch management, because I don't know who you use for patch management, but I know that I've seen patch management done well, and I've seen, actually, honestly, I really don't know if I've seen patch management done really well, to be honest with you, but I've seen patch management done poorly. Where have you looked at Pulseway? Have you used their patch management solutions before?
We haven't looked at it. We use Automate as part of the ConnectWise package, and their patch management when we first started was abysmal. It was just, we went from an environment where we had set up, Windows Update Service pretty much at every client. We're trying to centrally manage that, which was a pain in the butt. And so we were really excited when we moved to Automate, because it had patch management built into it, and it was just very difficult, kludgy to work. It was almost as bad as WSUS, and we weren't getting the results that we wanted. And especially when you produce a report like we do every month to your clients, and you want to show a lot of green, right? You don't want to show any red. Red is bad. So when we were seeing, patch statuses of 50% of systems 100% patch, that was not a good thing, But over time, a lot of pushing by partners got them to kind of change their engine, and now we're really happy with the way that the patch management works. The big challenge to patch management, and I'm kind of interested to see how Pulseway does this, is with Microsoft's new mantra of Windows 10 is the last version of Windows, right, at the desktop, and it's all these packs that come out annually or semi-annually. Those are literally like completely new operating systems in many cases. They don't be fooled by the fact it's goes from 1903 to 2004. This is like a brand new version of Windows. You could literally call it Windows 11 or 12 if you wanted to. And that big a change requires a lot of underlying support when it comes to drivers and firmware. And what we're seeing is that a lot of these updates are being impacted by the fact that patch management systems don't push out firmware updates, don't push out device driver updates, and they're impacting these Windows 10 upgrades because they break or they slow down or suddenly the PC stops working correctly. So now we've adopted internally a policy that the first thing we do if we get somebody calling in saying, hey, my PC's acting weird, is like, let's check the firmware. Let's check the BIOS updates or device driver updates, because for sure something got installed that's not playing nice. And so that's the next big challenge for these patch management systems on Windows environments, is how do you deal with these big updates and all the underlying problems that they cause. So I'm curious to see if Pulseway has solved that problem. But having said that, if we didn't have a patch management solution, 90 cents per device is not a bad price. You guys should obviously get 10 cents of that as your royalty fee for coming up with a solution for them. But 10 cents, 15,000 devices, it starts to add up after a while. So, but all kidding aside, I think it's a great solution for IT service providers that don't have a patch, that haven't invested in RMM with patch management, and that now have all of these remote workers, and the fact that many of them are using their home systems that aren't tied into any sort of regular patch updates, but yet are VPNing into the office and exposing, creating yet another point of vulnerability. It'd be great if you could just make sure that all those systems were as patched as the systems that you're managing in the office.
It's very true. And it's kind of funny as I sit here and think, and I could be wrong, but I'm thinking back to when at the start of Windows 10, Microsoft was very gung-ho about including device driver updates with Windows Update, because it's you're right, it's a problem that needs to get solved, but there's so many variables. It seems like, and I'm curious to see too how Pulseway handles this, but there's definitely an opportunity for some company to really dive in and solve the whole like automated patch management and with driver dependency modeling around it, and knowing when to apply device driver updates and not. Because when Microsoft tried to do it at the beginning of Windows 10, it was an epic disaster. If you remember that, like everybody was mad, because that can cause just as much instability as it can solving stability problems with new versions. So I agree, not an easy problem to solve. I would like 10 cents for every desktop, or for goodness sakes, Rich, get on the phone. We need our 10 cents.
You have it on tape.
We do, or at least a sponsorship. My goodness, we're feeding them all these good ideas. I tell you. Oh, all right. 10 cents, Rich. That's not a lot of money.
No.
What can you buy with 10 cents anyway? So I want the 10 cents. All right, I'm going to move on before I get frustrated. No, I'm just kidding. All right, we're going to move on from the news. So these two go together is what it says. I think that's a note for me, but now it's a note for everybody. So let's talk about this story. So it's SolarWinds talking to MSP partners, and Veeam seeing promise in the coronavirus-fueled shift to cloud computing. They don't seem like they go together, Rich. It seems like chocolate and peanut butter to me. But
there is a common thread here, though, which I will explain, and it will kind of set us up to sanity check, to test this common thread against Luis's experience out there in the market. Because you were kind of hinting at what intrigues me about both of these stories here at the top of the show. So, you think back to March, and it feels like the world is falling apart, and the economy is grinding to a halt, and we know that we're in for a very serious recession, and this is going to have financial implications for channel pros out there. We just don't know how big and how bad that's going to be. We're worried about people going out of business. So a couple of times in the last week, major names in the industry have held online conferences, SolarWinds MSP on the one hand and Veeam on the other. And in both cases, senior leaders at those companies have said either to their audience or to us here at ChannelPro in an interview, you know what, things are looking okay. And I mean, and you got to be careful about what you mean by okay. I mean, obviously, there are MSPs and VARs out there who are hurting. There are a ton of SMBs who are in rough shape right now, and tens of millions of people who have lost their job. And so I don't want to make it sound like the economic situation in this country isn't bad, because it is. But it's not as bad for people, particularly, apparently, according to some of the vendors out there, for people who are in the managed services world right now. And, this is something that the SolarWinds MSP people said. It's something that Fred Vacola said on this podcast a few weeks ago, as well as to his audience in an online event. What we are learning, we kind of knew, but are learning in a sense too, having reinforced, confirmed for us, is that a managed service provider, an IT provider now, is very, very much an essential service provider. You really can't be in business without IT now. And so you may not be able to pay all the bills if you're a small or mid-sized business, but you're going to pay that one, because that's what's going to keep the money coming in, the lights on, et cetera. And so obviously a very rough market for everybody, including channel pros. But as we get a few months into this period here, that, as you were saying before, Luis, isn't going away soon, it sure looks like the impact has not been as painful as we thought it was going to be for channel pros, because the service that our readers, are providing is so essential, so strategic to SMBs. So tell us a little bit more about, your expectations back in March versus what you're seeing now.
Yeah, so, I'll start a little bit before that. Every year we, like a lot of businesses, we have our annual planning retreat where we take our management team off site for a couple of days, and we just, drink a lot and think a lot and try to come up with what our plan is going to be for the coming year. And in our case, we have a 3-year, we're practitioners of something called the EOS system, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. and it has a 3-year track that you follow. And so you have the sliding window, and we were looking at it going, we're doing good. We achieved most of our goals, about 80% of our goals for 2019. Let's look at 2020, and it looked really bright and shiny, and there's nothing but upside, right? It's going to be an election. People are going to be spending lots of money. The economy looked pretty strong. And then come February, you started to see that by then we knew coronavirus was out there. We knew it was impacting China. We knew it was impacting Europe. And we were starting to see the repercussions in our neck of the woods as companies started to just kind of say, well, it's a little unusual out there. We just want to hold off on some big projects until maybe we'll wait a couple months. Let's see what happens. Well, then March happened, and in California, at least, we went into lockdown about the middle of the month, and that impacted especially our hospitality industry, where we are in Central California. About half of the economy is based on hospitality. Monterey Peninsula, Pebble Beach, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, lots of restaurants, lots of people coming in from all over the world. We have events like the AT&T Pro-Am and the PGA Tour, big giant events. We have Laguna Seca Raceway that has all these races. And then on the other side, we have agriculture, big driver of the more rural part of the state. And when this happened, hospitality just ceased. And that has repercussions, because not only is it just the bigger players, but all the little suppliers, the people that provide linens, the people that provide food service, all these things started to cascade. So there was a real cliff that happened in terms of everything but our managed services. If it wasn't, I tell you, if you were around here at least, and I heard the same thing from a number of my peers across the country, if you were a T&M person or a T&M company or a project-based company, you were hurt because all of these things suddenly slid to a stop. And our clients, knock on wood, I will really knock on wood, we're largely a managed services provider with monthly recurring revenue, which is a big part of our business. And that didn't go away, and that just remained steady. People were paying those bills because they recognized, hey, we're dependent on these guys. Our hotel may be shut down, but we still need the systems at the hotel to run, and we need to be able to work even with a skeleton crew. Same thing, our ag clients were busier than ever on one side of the equation, because now we were all staying home and baking bread and making all sorts of new recipes that we've never made before, because what else do we have to do but cook? The other side, though, it was the food service side. They supply agricultural products to hotels and to convention centers and to schools, and all those things shut down. So there was a financial impact that was very sudden and very intense. And now, though, we're getting past that. So for us, what we're seeing is a true V recovery, if you will, where I don't want to revisit March and April on my P&L, but it's starting to look really good now for the second half of the year. And a lot of those were pent-up projects, things that we had on the books in the pipeline that just got halted, but now are moving forward again. And new things, because now people want to talk about digital transformation. They want to talk about, hey, we know that when we set up this remote work from home force, we kind of had to do it on the cheap and on the quick. Now we want to bake this into our operations, because our people are going to still be working remotely at least half the time. And we're talking not just smaller businesses, but one of our clients is a local hospital, and they said our financial department, which is about 150 people, they're going to be working from home half the week. So we need to make sure they're securely connected and that they aren't going to be impacted. And we want to get them new systems. So it's I think as MSPs, we were in California at least considered essential businesses. So we didn't shut down at all. Our people were still going on site and doing work and things like that. And I think that's the way it was across most of the country, because IT is so embedded in everything we did. And it's, you guys recognize this. If this pandemic had hit 20 years ago, we couldn't have done it. We couldn't have shut down, because there was just no way. The number of people that would have gotten infected and died would have been much higher, because we couldn't have shut down the economy the way we did and still continue to function. That's a testament to where we are today in our technology evolution, that we can use Zoom to have meaningful business interactions that let us stay in business. We can use, the Microsoft suite of products, including Teams, to collaborate with our teammates that are working from home or working from hotel rooms or wherever they're working from. So the power of technology has proven itself to be resilient enough to survive this. And if you remember, in the early days of shelter in place or stay at home, there was some question of whether the internet could handle it, right? There was like, can Comcast keep up? Can Spectrum keep up? Could AT&T keep up? And I don't think there was a beat skipped, as they like to say. Things just kind of moved along very smoothly. And that's because you have IT professionals that are making things work. And so I agree with the analysis that we have proven ourselves to be essential beyond just the technical term, but more like the realization, I think, from our clients, that we really were key to their success, their ability to continue to function.
Yeah, well, and it's because of IT as well. And you hit the point right home that it's amazing that today, as opposed to 20 years ago, so much of our economy could continue to go and still function, even though we weren't able to necessarily go to workplaces. So it's pretty interesting. That it's also very important to point out, Luis, that when you sage advice for everyone, when you're working with a skeleton crew, never give them heavy projects, right? Because they just don't have the muscle for it.
They don't have the muscle for it.
All right. On that note, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we got a great interview with JD Helms, the Vice President of Modern Workplace at NetApp. I'm really excited to do that. So stick around after the break. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. We got an excellent guest interview lined up for you today. As we all know, the coronavirus has encouraged a wave of companies to start implementing work from home practices. And it doesn't look like that's going to be going away anytime soon. And it's also impacted the market for cloud solutions that facilitate work from home environments, particularly Windows Virtual Desktop. And no better to talk about all of those topics than JD Helms, the Vice President of Modern Workplace at NetApp and formerly the President of CloudJumper. JD Helms, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
We're excited to have you on. For those who may not be familiar with you and with NetApp, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, thanks. So prior to NetApp, I was with CloudJumper, and we specialized in virtual desktop computing in the cloud with our software, Cloud Workspace Management Suite, right, which is now has been rebranded, and we have a number of integrations in flight and already on the way out with NetApp, and it's now the VDS or Virtual Desktop Service at NetApp. With CloudJumper, I was responsible for the overall direction, strategy, product of the company. Within NetApp, it's a little bit similar but different focus, a much bigger, broader view, if you will. With NetApp and Modern Workplace, what we see there is the culmination of the digital workspace transformation taking place. And so within the NetApp context, it's about how does virtual desktop services provide a seamless journey for the customers, whether they're on-prem, in the cloud, or in the transition period between both, because virtual desktop is the infrastructure. It is a user experience. It is everything there. So within NetApp, I'm responsible for stitching all of that together and bringing that product set to the market.
Now, I'm sure that transition and that growth in virtual desktop and things like NetApp didn't start when the coronavirus started, but I'm sure you've seen a massive rise in interest in that kind of product and that need in the marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's funny in a lot of ways. The timing of the coronavirus is never a good thing. For us, the acquisition by NetApp, the timing was perfect, with the acquisition specifically being tied to resources, ability to scale to the demand, is something that CloudJumper as its own entity really would have struggled with. And now as the larger corporation and the parent company, or really a product set, right, within NetApp, we are much better positioned. And NetApp believes in that vision and is pumping the resources and the opportunities into our organization to meet that need, which is really great for our partners, for our customers in the market.
It was good for you. It was apparently also really good for webcam makers. They have done quite well in this particular environment.
Yeah, right. Webcam and the YouTube folks with the friendly ring lights. All right, that's every kid's wish list these days.
You know, JD, there are a number of these different variations of a similar concept out in the industry right now. This idea that what an SMB in particular is looking for right now is a complete bundle of all the cloud-based services that they need to equip a remote worker or even a worker in an office space. So you guys call it modern workplace. What is your sort of definition of the essential tools that an SMB employee needs to be set up and ready to go in that kind of cloud environment?
Sure. So it's not just the applications and the access that the end user, that SMB requires. It's about the IT administrative organization within that small business group, whether that's an IT service provider or whether that's an internal admin who's trying to pull all of these things together at this time. So, right, it's the basics. You got to have some decent connectivity. You got to have an endpoint device, whether that's your personal computer, as people are being forced, right, to embrace the work from home mentality. But then you get into, what about my data? How do I access my applications? Because I'm all of a sudden working, you know, I've got a great desktop computer at my office that I can't go to. So now I need to get access to the data and the applications that are there. And so a cloud workspace allows and enables that to happen seamlessly for those organizations. So, you know, the basics of connectivity, and then they need, you know, it's a really interesting concept, Rich. The end users, if NetApp and BDS, if we do our job the right way, they really don't know that we're there, right? They're logging into a login.cloudworkspace.com environment and they go to work. And everything should just be there for them. Their data should be there. Their data should be backed up and protected, right? NetApp's the best company in the world from a storage perspective to make that happen. In fact, with the acquisition, we're in the process of upgrading all of the infrastructure storage components that were powering the CloudJumper data centers that we were leveraging for the on-prem offerings. That's in progress. The customers aren't going to see hardly any impact there except improved performance and capabilities. Then you got to make sure that something that a lot of people don't think about, you know, with this remote work from home environment and Office 365, Microsoft has done a phenomenal job in putting that package together, and we've watched it grow over time from hosted exchange to the full product suite that it is today. But now you got to back up and protect that data as well. A lot of people assume that it's in Office 365 is backed up. No, you have revisions, you have versioning. But if someone makes a mistake and they delete your Outlook inbox or they delete your account and you suddenly need to go back and recover all of that data, how do you do that? And so with the NetApp acquisition, one of the products that falls into my portfolio beyond just the CloudJumper, formerly CloudJumper BDS product, is a product called SaaS Backup, which you can enable right from the set. It enables the customers to recover their data, the partners can recover their data. It's set up very friendly for the IT service provider MSP marketplace and for the customers to be able to back up and protect that data. So it's really, how can that end user work the same way they used to work without impacting their productivity? And that means a viable cloud workspace, connectivity, infrastructure, storage, protection, antivirus. The whole stack is still there. But now the challenge is for the people that are supporting that business, how do they stitch all of that together? And what happens if there's a cloud of choice preference, right? You have Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop, which is a phenomenal product. But what happens if that customer is already deep into the Google ecosystem? as a business provider, an IT services provider, how do I learn multiple systems and deliver a valuable service back to my customers? Do I have to hire additional people? Do I have to learn and train these people? I mean, let's be honest, it's a deep ecosystem. When you start going through the certification paths and how do I support these companies, they're parallel skills, but very different. And that's really where the big strength of VDS comes into. We believe in cloud. There's a movie I love, Braveheart, and there's a line, right, where he yells, freedom, right? Well, we believe in that. I believe in the cloud, but I believe in the freedom of cloud. The business customer, the partners, should be able to choose where they need to be based off of their applications, their specific workload. Maybe it's their geography, if you need to handle multiple sites, if you're a big company with geographically dispersed groups. Just because all your data lives in US East, what do you do for the 50 people who are in US West, right? How do you control that and make sure that their experience on the West is just as good as the people on the East? And so VDS aggregates that, gives you a single user interface to manage all of those environments. So if you're an IT service provider and you have customers running in Google, customers running in Amazon, maybe you've got your own data center with some vSphere in there, and you need to make sure you've got a lot of customers there that you're protecting. Maybe you need to move them to the cloud. Maybe they're in Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop. I've got one customer with 38,000 users today. They're in Azure, but because of their specific needs, they're running on RDS. That's like 5 different technologies that we just ran through that the IT organization, whether it's an MSP or an internal group, has to learn and manage. If you're a VDS customer, you just need to learn to use one tool, because you can log into that single pane of glass and manage all of those environments with all the orchestration connected in. So it's, how do I make this easy for people to consume, deliver, so that the end user, which is what it's really all about, doesn't know that any of the stuff we just talked about even exists. And that's how you deliver to the end user what they need to be successful.
You know, I think a lot of SMBs, based on what they've been through in recent months, I mean, you know, anyone who had any hesitation about applications and data in the cloud, you know, is probably open to that model at this point. But, you know, VDI is famously the technology that's always on the verge of taking off, hasn't quite gotten there yet. Are you seeing within the last few months a greater openness on the end user side, as well as the partner side, to take the entire workspace, the entire desktop into the cloud, as well as the applications and the data?
We're seeing that across the market from small to large. It's not even, you know, this unfortunate pandemic has forced organizations to embrace things that they never thought they. I've heard a statistic, and I've heard varying percentage numbers. So the accuracy is a little bit up in the air, but the general concept or construct, I think, is very valid. There is before the pandemic, there was anywhere between, depending on who you believe, 15 to 7% of organizations embraced a consistent work from home mentality. And today, that has almost completely flipped upside down, right? Now it's 85 to 95, higher depending on who you listen to, are completely embracing that. Now, I don't think that 85, 95 number is going to stay there, right? There's lots of reasons to go back to the office and work, not the least of which is my wife wants me out of the house. But there's also, it's not going to go back, right? We're not going to go back to 7 to 15%, wherever that number is. So it's going to end up somewhere in that middle number, right? Whether that's 40%, 60%. And my argument, Rich, would be to all of these companies is, you know what, where it ends up is irrelevant, because regardless of where you're at in that spectrum, it's a tectonic shift in how we work. The ability of these technologies to free organizations up of where do they acquire their talent, to free the people who are delivering the work, those knowledge workers, back into these organizations to choose where do they want to live. I mean, this is going to trickle down. It's going to impact real estate markets. It's going to impact commercial real estate. It's going to impact the growth of our cities. And this is a massive shift culturally, not just for the US, but at a global level, of how we look at work.
You know, JD, one of the challenges that we have, because as a service provider, you know, in March we did nothing but set up clients to work remotely, whether that was through VPN, through VDI, or you know, a multitude of different combinations. There was this mad scramble to get everybody productive from home, and now that the dust has settled, we are having conversations with clients about, you know, accelerating the digital transformation of their business. The challenge that we have, especially in the you know, the S part of the SMB, is there's desire there, but there's also limited resources, because they just made this massive investment over the course of the last couple of years to get rid of, you know, Windows 7, or Server 2008, and they migrated into, you know, spending money to get all of their systems current, and now going to them and saying, yeah, well, we're going to move all that stuff into the cloud. It's a difficult conversation. They want to do it, and it's definitely on the roadmap. So what do you say to, especially on the smaller side of companies, you know, how do you push them over the line?
Sure. It's not, you know, it's not necessarily about having to. That's a great question about pushing them over the line. Look, they're going to want to have the ability to work on their local machines, right? So a lot of those upgrades are, you know, whether it's a Surface Book, a device, whatever that laptop is, and then you're going to have the ones who have the equipment that's on-prem. There's going to be need to have the ability to do that. Work offline doesn't just go away, right? Internet's not everywhere quite yet. They haven't covered the world with enough satellites. I know someone's working on it, Elon Musk, but you know, something's going to give there. But for these partners, they're already there. Most of them are already leveraging Office 365 or Google G Suite for however they're working, right? If they're looking at from a security perspective with M365 licensing and everything that comes with that, then they're already entitled for Windows Virtual Desktop. There's no additional licensing cost. Now you're looking at the infrastructure components. Well, the infrastructure components are going to be charged at Linux machine rates. So you're not having to pay for the OS cost in Azure for WVD, if that's what their target is. And then, you know, VDS, our technology platform, has algorithms and scheduling tools already baked into the system to enable you as a service provider to optimize their computing consumption to their actual usage. So very powerful, very flexible tools to model out, what does this actually cost me, right? So you've got to validate to the customer and show them a model of, this is what your cost is going to be. And then you can start talking about compliance. Do you have HIPAA compliance? Do you have SOC compliance for our partners over in the UK? What about, or, you know, Europe, GDP? NetApp brings a lot of additional tool sets that can be layered into that to show those things. But if you look at from I mean, there's just so many pieces, right? From a security, from a compliance. On the security side, what is the more secure gateway? One that Microsoft is controlling as a black box PaaS service through WVD with a reverse connect out to make sure you're secure and compliant. Anyone who's tried to recover or had an event with a crypto locker event, this gives you a very immediate way to recover from that, because your user data is segmented out separately from your corporate data, which is segmented out separately from your OS data. So all of these parts become plug and play to enable a recovery from an event if it happens, which is a greater likelihood of it happening in a much faster manner. So, and then the last piece of it is, are you going to bring all of your people back? Are all of your employees going to accept the requirement that they have to be back in the office? So there's going to have to be a meeting there between not only us and our small business customers, our large customers, but even their employees. How are they going to want to work? Because it's going to open up a lot of, a lot of opportunities for those workers to choose who and where they want to work with.
So, you know, that flexibility, that opportunity on the end user side to work whenever, wherever. I saw that a lot of benefits, obviously, for the SMB in this model here. let's look at it from a ChannelPro perspective, though, from the perspective of the MSP or the reseller. How profitable, how big an opportunity is this that we're talking about here for the partner who's selling it to their customer?
Yeah, I saw some numbers recently on this. I've seen, again, there's a little bit of variance depending on which analyst group you subscribe to or who you're following, but roughly a 35 to 50% range compound annual growth rate for desktop as a service delivery model over the next 3 years. It's going to go from, specifically cloud-based desktop as a service delivery, is going to go from less than 700 million a year in 2019 to, again, depending on which models you believe, north of 2.5 billion in the next 3 years. That's a significant shift in space and opportunity. And from the channel partners, the organizations that are having that conversation, to your point, Luis, actively having those conversations with the customers and maintaining that relationship and bringing them the solutions, are going to have a huge opportunity to capture the majority of that transitional shift. Because I think, personally, I think a lot of what we're seeing in those numbers is the fact that the SMB market is now looking to embrace the cloud, right? Many enterprises have done so already. They have a lot of the resources and staffing and technology and relationships with the vendors to make these moves. Some have been slow and they're looking at it now. But if you look at what makes up the average business, most business in the US and globally is small business. It's not necessarily an enterprise organization. And so as these smaller businesses continue their journey into the cloud, and I think it's going to happen very rapidly, there's a huge opportunity there for those partners to grab that market share. And it's highly profitable. It's, again, you own that customer. You know, one of the things that I ran an MSP many years ago, and one of the things that we always would see happening, and we did it ourselves, it makes sense, it's good business. You go in and you do an assessment on the customer's technology stack, right? MSP comes in, they analyze the systems, and then they say, and let's be really honest with each other, any MSP can make any other MSP look really bad when they come in and do one of these assessments, right? If you own that customer relationship and you've moved that customer's infrastructure and application environment into the cloud, you just prevented another MSP from being able to run that assessment. You've prevented them from coming in and stealing the customer because you own that relationship and that customer is in the cloud under your purview and management. It's a much more sticky solution over time than anything else that the partners, in my personal opinion, have had the opportunity to go to market with as a solution in 20 years.
So from a profitability, from a margin standpoint, is this one of those scenarios where the profit is coming, for you as an MSP, the profit's coming from the monthly maintenance, the support that you're providing around that solution, or is the cloud solution itself, the subscription, a profitable one?
I think it's both. I think the best MSPs, I've heard this analogy before and I kind of co-opted it. The best MSPs don't sell you the ingredients. The best MSPs sell you a cake, right? Again,
oh, wait, what kind of cake?
Well, for me, it would be a double layer chocolate cake, maybe a German. If you can throw some cherries on top, we can just call this good and go home. But
is there a Baker Square around here? Okay, sorry, no, continue, please.
No worries. So again, it's the customers, their business isn't IT. Their business is running their business, right? So they don't want to know all about the stuff that's happening on in the background. They just want you to take care of it. So the profitability is in that solution set that the MSPs are selling and providing back to their customers, right? The pieces are almost interchangeable. You know, I worked with one MSP early last year. They were going through a big transition on their antivirus product. And I was like, hey, that's a lot of work. Why are you doing that? He's like, well, I got 15,000 endpoints and I'm going to save $2 on the AV product and it's a better product. This is great for me. And I said, oh, that's awesome. You have any problems with your customers? Like, my customers, they don't care. They don't know what AV product I'm using. They don't even want to know. What they want to know is that they're protected and secure, right? So I think that's really where the profitability is for the partners, is they're going to be able to continue to optimize their offering, continue to be able to deliver that back to their customers and differentiate where they're at. Because at the end of the day, an MSP, IT service company, is selling the same service, right? We compete. We've seen that competition within MSPs. But who puts that solution set together the best and takes care of that customer's needs is who's going to win. We're selling the same things, right? If my wife wants to go buy a Ford or she wants to go buy a Chevy, they're both great cars. You know, we're going to buy the Ford, by the way. But that's the differentiation, right?
So great stuff. And unfortunately, we're running a little short on time. But I want to end it with one last question. If Braveheart were to buy a car, what brand would it be?
It'd have to be a Hummer, one of the original H1 versions, big, tough, and angry, right?
That's a very, very good assessment. All right, and one last final question: Braveheart versus the Patriot.
Oh man! All right, I'm an American, so I got to go with the Patriot.
well said. Good choice, because when you were making that comparison about Braveheart and yelling, I'm like, well, after that, it didn't turn out very well for him. So maybe we should model ourselves after the Patriot instead. I want to give you a big thanks to JD Helms for joining us today. JD, you talked about a lot of solutions, a lot about NetApp, and I'm sure you've got everybody's interest peaked on and wanting to learn more about it. Where can they go to find more about NetApp and a little bit more about you?
A great question. Cloud.netapp.com is where all the solution sets are there. VDS, virtual desktop services listed there, and all the other components, cloud compliance, cloud insights for monitoring. Everything is there on cloud.netapp.com.
All right, and we will put a link to that on our show notes page on YouTube and on our website, channelpronetwork.com. So, JD, thank you very much for being here. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we have 5 questions for Luis Alvarez, and I do have a museum pick if we have enough time. We'll just have to see how that goes. We will be right back. You won't want to miss it. Stick around. And we are back with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly, where we will wrap up the show with some regular features that we usually do. I do want to point out, it was a really interesting interview with JD Helms. I wish we had more time, because that is obviously a very important and growing area in IT right now, which is cloud has been a big thing for years and years now, but this mad rush to get all kinds of workloads going cloud-based, so you can work remotely, things like Windows Virtual Desktop. We got to get him back on to talk about those topics, because he clearly knows what he's talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been somebody who has been sort of, tutoring me about that. He's really the guy who opened my eyes to how important ultimately Windows Virtual Desktop will be in this industry. He was really the first person to make that case to me. And I would love to have him back on the show as this story kind of evolves. Because cloud is one thing, Office 365 is one thing, but when you're talking about getting the entire workplace online, it's a bigger story and a bigger opportunity.
That it is indeed. So we will keep an eye on that. We are going to skip the museum and tech pick this week. I will save it for you for next week. No problem at all. Look forward to that, because I really, really would like to get a round of 5 questions in with Mr. Luis Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez, do you know what that is?
No idea, but
okay,
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Can't wait. So here's the premise of 5 questions. It's a segment we've kind of adopted in the last 10, 15 shows or so, where we basically, Rich and I, will come up with 5 questions off the top of our head. It could be about anything and everything. The point of the matter is that we don't write them in advance, and it's whatever we can think of on the spot. So are you ready to play? And there's no gotchas. We're not here to embarrass you or anything like that. It's all just in good fun and to learn a little bit more about you. In?
I'm ready.
All right, Rich, question number 1 to you.
Okay. Well, you earlier on in the show, you mentioned the AT&T Pro-Am. 20 years ago, in a different life, I was at Microsoft. I got a chance to go to a few of the Pro-Ams, so I've been to that course before, and it just popped into my head as you mentioned that in those days, I remember, this is 20 years ago, if you were you didn't belong to the club, you just wanted to play around at Pebble, it was $500 a person. So question 1 is, have you played there? And question 2, we'll just call it one question. What does it cost these days? Do you know what the green fee is at Pebble these days?
So I have played at Pebble. And today, because of the lack of people coming to the area, you can get on the course pretty much anytime you want for 125 bucks.
Wow.
Wow, so if you're a golfer, run, don't walk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pebble,
This
and
is
get
a
on
good
that
time
course
on
while
the
you can do it for
Pebble.
cheap.
Most people don't know that Pebble is a public course, so it has to be open to the public. But if you're not staying, usually during normal times, if you're not staying there, the only tee times are available are like 7 and 7:30 a.m. So
That's too early for
Too
a lot of
early.
people. Way
me,
too
anyway.
early, especially for me. I didn't even know there was a 7:30 a.m. until you just said that right now. All right. Question number 2 to me. I remember way back in the top of the show, we were talking about crab, and I like crab a lot. So tell me your favorite way to have crab.
At the campsite, my favorite way is scrambled eggs with crab scrambled in them, because my wife's aunt makes an awesome scramble with it's just amazing, and we put Tabasco on it, and I eat way too much. When I make it at home, I love crab cakes. I'm a big fan of crab cakes, and something that I can make on my own without my wife interfering, which there are very few things that she will let me do on my own in the kitchen, but this is one of them.
Very interesting. Rich, question number 3 to you.
So something about you that we haven't actually spoken about at all, and it's a fascinating thing that unfortunately we don't have time to get into in depth, but you have an entire IT business specifically focused on the legalized cannabis market. And it just kind of makes me wonder. So you have agricultural clients who are growing other crops. So I mean, are your cannabis customers any different from, any more likely to be in tie-dye and listening to Grateful Dead than your other agricultural clients?
At the beginning of the adult use era, so about 4 years ago, yeah, these guys were all stoners that were getting into the business, and they walked really slow. They had no attention span. It was hard to get them to sign pieces of paper, things like that. But all kidding aside, over the last couple of years, the industry has really professionalized as it's matured, and they brought in real CFOs and CEOs and folks that are more business oriented than the guys who thought they were going to make a ton of money just by setting up shop on the corner. But you still have a lot of folks that are from that legacy business involved. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with very many of them anymore.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And if you have any of those customers, always bring snacks. They always appreciate that. All right. Question number 4. I'm half cheating because I kind of thought about this question in the beginning as I was dying to ask at the time. But you mentioned that the author Steinbeck is from your hometown, and that a lot of people don't like him because a lot of his characters and stuff were based on people in real life. Have you met any of these people, and what was the character and what was the story?
Well, they wouldn't, if you're not from the local area, they wouldn't really resonate with anybody, because it's kind of like small town politics. So when he wrote East of Eden, there was a family that were rebelling against each other and fighting and had all sorts of weird stuff going on. If you remember that book, well, I know that family, the Church family. They really exist, and they really have they have a bone to pick with John Steinbeck in that book, and because it made their great grandfather and great grandmother look really bad, and they thought that they had taken to hear them tell it. Here was this writer who they embraced and was talking about telling these beautiful tales of the area and the region, and he turned out to be just little more than a TMZ in the early days, just talking smack about all the people that he met.
Yeah, and people who he wrote about. That's amazing. Yeah. That's so cool. I bet there's lots of interesting stories in your hometown about that, and lots of people still there.
So. Oh yeah, I mean, he and Doc Rickett, who was his traveling companion and kind of his sidekick for a long time, moved from Salinas to Monterey. The Doc Rickett's lab is over in Monterey, and it actually was a real lab that he experimented in, and they took a lot of people for granted and made a lot of enemies in the process, but also a lot of fans, all of them outside this area. So really popular in Europe. We see a lot of, it's not unusual back when traveling was allowed to see, a bunch of people from England or France walking around the streets of Salinas looking for John Steinbeck, points of interest.
So cool. So cool. That's awesome. All right, Rich, I will give you question number 5.
Well, let's see. So you're based in Salinas. You mentioned Monterey is right up the road, and Carmel is right up the road from Monterey. So of those 3 places, which is your favorite and why?
I love them all individually. It's like your children, right? You can't pick one. But I will say my favorite place to hang out is Carmel, because they have a lot of really great restaurants. It's a small walkable community. The entire city of Carmel is literally 1 square mile. Most people don't know that, but it's very compact and dense. So there's a lot of shops, a lot of restaurants, and now over the last few years, a lot of tasting rooms. A lot of wineries in Monterey County have, Monterey County has a big wine region that most people don't think about very much, because they think about Napa and Sonoma, but Monterey County produces more grapes than Napa and Sonoma put together. And they have all these wineries that are scattered throughout the rural areas, and they weren't getting a lot of traction, so they opened tasting rooms in Carmel. So there's something like 35 tasting rooms now in Carmel, and it's great. You can walk around, have some great wine, have some great food, and then go down to the beach and sit down and eat your edible and just kind of get mellow.
Wow, I want to go wine tasting with you, Louis. That sounds like a lot of fun. All right, well, thank you so much for playing 5 questions. And we get you back, we'll have five new ones to ask.
Excellent. Look forward to it.
And you never know what it's going to be. All right, well, I'm going to reserve my museum and tech pick for next week, because we are rapidly running out of time. I want to give a big, warm, heartfelt thank you to Luis Alvarez for joining us here as guest host today. It was great having you on. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun.
I did. It was great.
And I hope it didn't scare you to the point where you'll never come back.
No, absolutely. I'm happy to come back. Just make sure that I'm, on when all my vendors are being talked about. It makes
Absolutely. Absolutely. That we will do. So, Louis, for those who want to learn more about your company or learn more about you, connect with you. Are you on the social networks? Are you on LinkedIn? Where can they find you?
Yep. I'm, you can find us on the web at alvareztg.com. We're on LinkedIn, Alvarez TG, Facebook page, facebook.com/AlvarezTG. And I'm personally on LinkedIn, Luis M. Alvarez. So feel free to connect up. And on Twitter, I don't tweet very much, but I'm more of a voyeur when it comes to Twitter. But every now and then I do post some things.
I knew you were a smart person. All right. Well, thank you again so much for being on as guest host. Rich, I'm going to turn it to you. You have 1 minute, 1 minute exactly, to tell us about the In Case You Missed It post and to give us a preview of what we might see next week.
So In Case You Missed It is where every Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com, our own James Gaskin catches you up on news from the week that was that we haven't talked about on this podcast, for example. And lots of stuff going on this week. We haven't even touched on the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, a whole bunch of new products from Acer. James is going to get you caught up on all of that stuff, and he's also going to tell you a little bit about a guy. If you're out fishing with a buddy and the buddy catches a shark by mistake, just let the hook go. You don't want to put your hand in there to get the hook back from your friend. And James can explain more about that. There have been a ton of conferences this week and last week. There aren't actually conferences coming up next week. All I can tell you, without naming names, is there might be a little data center hardware news. There might be a little managed services software maker news. We've got some news coming up for you next week on ChannelProNetwork.com. So please check in daily.
That is exactly what people should do. Is they should go to ChannelProNetwork.com, make it your homepage. We've got white papers, we've got articles, we've got news, we've got podcasts, we've got all of the resources and information that you need, the latest and the greatest, to make your business better on that website all day, every day, coming all day long. So go there, check it out, keep it up on your screen anytime you are online. So ChannelProNetwork.com is the website. We are on LinkedIn. We're Channel Pro Network on LinkedIn. We're Channel Pro Network on Facebook. We are at Channel Pro SMB on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I'm at Matt Whitlock. Mr. Rich Freeman is
at Rich Free
on the Twitters. You can find him there. And I want to give another big thank you to Luis Alvarez for joining us, and a big thank you to our guest interviewee, Mr. JD Helms from NetApp. All great stuff. And I will remind you all to subscribe to ChannelPro Weekly, because that is how you know what's going on. We are on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on YouTube. So subscribe to us there. Hit the red button, hit the bell if you like to watch. Otherwise, pick out your favorite audio podcast place, and we're there. You'll find us and add us and listen to us on the go. So do that now before you go, and we will see you all next week.